In every society, it is the artist's role to create work that says the things politicians, financiers, and industry leaders cannot. By sparking conversation in this way, perspective grows and progress continues. That is why freedom of expression forever remains a cornerstone of every democracy. Portions of the following conversation may concern you.
There's a lot of things going on in the economic world lately that are beyond questionable and definitely not in the whole general public's best interests, and they're very seldom talked about. One of the interesting things, we're talking specifically about the entire subprime mortgage fiasco that basically has duped the entire world into a position where there are whole countries on the verge of bankruptcy because of a scam that was strategically executed by America. They gave mortgages to crackheads or people that didn't even have jobs. Beyond that, they even gave them more than the mortgage so that they could be assured that the payments would be made for an appropriate period of time so that they could be bundled into other investments and sold around the world. Why has the whole world not just said, America, you need a timeout here? Like, come on, you're getting out of control.
That's what I have not understood from day one. I mean, I'm not an economist and I'm not a banker, but the first thing that catches my attention is a very simple question. If people are having a hard time making their monthly payments now, what happens when these subprime mortgages start to roll over?
There were $1 trillion of subprime mortgages sold, and every single person that chose to turn their house into a chip at the casino called the real estate market was put into two types of mortgages if they sold during that time frame. One was a 3-year reset mortgage. There was another $1 trillion of those done, which still hasn't hit yet. It should be hitting probably this summer. And then there's the 5-year reset, and they actually equated it to an economic time bomb. An economic time bomb was created here where everyone got the dream. American dream is a house with a white picket fence for everyone, and holy geez, they did it up right this time. They actually made sure that every person, even if you did not have a job, got to taste it just for that one instant so the rest of the world could be sucked into this fiasco. And now there's another $1 trillion that's going to hit any day now. Within the next 6 months, everyone that was in a 3-year, wow, guess what? Your interest rate's going up, and they all walk away too. Anybody who thinks that this is over is in la la land.
Can people not do simple math that if you're barely staying afloat now, what are you going to do a year or 2 years from now when the mortgage comes up for renegotiation and the interest rates have gone up in between times? Obvious, at least obvious to me anyway, your monthly mortgage payment is going to be that much bigger than the one that you're already having a problem with. What am I not understanding?
Everyone between the age of 35 and 45 years old is on the verge of complete and utter bankruptcy. They will all be walking away from their homes because they've been taking home equity loans just to stay afloat. If it wasn't for credit cards, they wouldn't be paying their bills as it is. Why? Because we have to work for less so that the next generation can have the illusion that they're even going to get their retirement.
Are we looking at essentially a repeat of something that I'm not sure if you saw it, but I lived through it, when mortgage interest rates went up to 20% plus, and the bank had on its hands a house with no real value in it because nobody could afford to buy the house in the second place?
Today's topic actually is boomer dreams versus corporate reality. John, how are you doing today?
Just fine, thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thank you for coming. What is the boomer dream?
The boomer dream, as I understand it, is that you're going to work for 30 or possibly 35 years, depending upon what kind of a career you have, what kind of a job you're doing. And at the end of that, you're going to retire and enjoy the rest of your life doing whatever your hobbies are and just enjoying life. And if you decide to get up this morning, well and good, you can get up in time to go and play golf. If you decide to sleep in, you're equally at leisure to do that and go down to the local restaurant for brunch if that's what it means to you, to have the opportunity of doing what you choose.
How realistic do you find, given recent economic events, that this is even attainable in any way, let alone to the extent that some people have been led to believe is even realistic?
Somebody who might have had, say, $100,000 that they had built up over the course of time is now back down to $60,000 in paper value. But what is even worse for them is that bonds of one kind or another that they've been rolling over, where they were used to getting 5 or 6 or 8% interest, they're not getting that anymore. And as a consequence of reduced income, these people are just not going to be able to take their retirement as soon as they would like, because living on Canada Pension Plan only is not going to afford these people the kind of lifestyle that they have been used to for the last 25 or 30 years.
The lifestyle was kind of unrealistic to begin with. What some people have put in their mind as what was attainable.
Yes.
There's an article here in the paper. It says retirement plans go boom. It was a national article that appeared everywhere, I'm assuming. And there's some very, very interesting figures that have been presented to the public, because obviously they're starting to prepare us for the idea that not all is well. But they're not coming out and actually saying that. They're just letting you know that there are some issues. But it's interesting because the article only deals in percentages.
That's the whole thing right there. I mean, 100% of nothing isn't much. So until you convert that into absolute numbers and relate it to the Canadian population, which is something over 30 million people now, relate it to 30 million people, what lies in the future for people like you or like me or the people that we know? What do these numbers actually come out to be?
First number is 14% of Canadians were retired in 2008. 4.2 million Canadians out of 30 million are currently retired. At $500 a month from CPP, which is not a lot, but we're going to keep it conservative here, it is $2.1 billion a month.
A month?
A month.
That's a pretty big number.
It's an unbelievably big number. We had to double check it a couple times because It's actually staggeringly huge. It's a 2 with 9 zeros behind it. What this article also says is that 30% of Canadians have no retirement savings at all.
None?
None. They have no retirement savings. CPP is it.
They're going to have to live or exist, I guess, on their CPP then, with no supplements of any sort?
No, the government actually does subsidize. There's something called the Guaranteed Income Security and the Old Age Security. So the government actually further subsidizes people that are in the lower incomes. They can be subsidized up to $16,000 per year. That's an additional $800 a month goes to 30% of the 4.2 million. That's another $1 billion. We are currently right now, as a country of 30 million people, spending $3.1 billion per month, and the boomer bubble hasn't even hit yet. It doesn't even begin until 2012. If 30% have no retirement savings at all, then their home is their primary retirement investment. What happens when 1 million plus homes all go on the market simultaneously within a 5-year period?
I don't think it takes any financial wizard to figure it out, but if the laws of supply and demand have any validity at all, and all of a sudden you flood any market with product, in this case being houses, there is only one thing that can happen. The product is just not going to have the value there, or it cannot demand the price that people originally thought it should be worth if the market is that strongly flooded.
And who's going to buy them? Because all of the other people that are that 35 to 45 age group that's looking to upgrade their homes, traditionally, they're already trying to pay off a $300,000 mortgage while making less than the generation before them. It just doesn't even make sense anymore. It's so far gone beyond reality that my brain can't even comprehend the delusion that people are living in right now. And that's part of the boomer dream, as I've been brought up to believe, is that, you know what, you work hard, you do the right thing. One day you're going to sell your property and you're going to move to the cottage, or you're going to go move to the country. You're going to find some place where it doesn't cost so much to live. But how do you get your money out of the city to begin with?
That's what I'm not understanding.
Exactly. I don't understand how everyone thinks that they're unique and they really all have the same plan.
I take your point. If governments are having a problem now financing things, what are they going to do when the boomer generation is fully retired or even partly retired? What sort of numbers are we looking at when the future starts to roll ahead on us?
According to Statistics Canada, the baby boomers represent 27.9% of the country.
28%, almost 30% of 30 million people. You're talking about 9 million more people?
9 million more people
that are going to be drawing out of the Canada Pension Plan.
Yeah, now there's going to be some that are leaving this wonderful planet as others are moving into the retirement phase of their life, but there's definitely going to be a peak there. We're looking at almost 42% of the country is going to be either retired or entering the retirement phase in the next 15 years. 42%. 27.9 plus 14 already is a lot of people.
Well, those are the numbers that are rattling around in my head, going back to the 30 million people, 30 million Canadians, which you're right, it's a small number. I think the population is over that. But 40% of 30 million people is 12 million people. That's a whole whack of people.
Well, and especially when you think that at 3.1 billion per month currently, that's going to double within the next decade. It's going to double. That's going to double because the pharmaceutical companies are going to guarantee that they will keep every person alive until every last drop of savings is out of their accounts. It's just part of the, everyone wants to live forever and no one wants to say goodbye. But there is a very specific element that is the pharmaceutical industry that is wholly subsidized by keeping people alive, even if there is no standard of living left.
Well, that's the thing that bothers me about that. I guess I'm fortunate in that to a pretty fair extent, I still have good health. And so I can afford to get out and do things and enjoy life. But how many of these people are going to end up bedridden or in wheelchairs and just existing?
Well, and that's the amazing thing is they all are. They all are eventually. This is what no one wants to deal with, and the government isn't even acknowledging at all. We are going to have 10 million of 30 million people that will eventually be bed or chair ridden. That is how every life ends. I'm sorry, blame the manufacturer. That's just the way that it goes. You get your golden years, and you think about it. A few years ago, you were 50, and then you're 65. Well, you're going to go from 65 to the bed or the chair pretty darn fast. That's just the way that it goes. Things are speeding up as you get older. So there's this beautiful little window that everyone's been promised that if you do everything right and you save your money, you can have a few years where you can do whatever you want. But immediately following those few years that everyone, just like when they're a teenager, they think they're invincible. Everyone thinks, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or I'll blow out on a heart attack on the golf course. Who knows what's going through these people's heads. But the fact is that eventually everyone is chair or bed ridden. Everyone. Where are the 5 to 7 million beds that we are going to need, because there'll be some dying off and some entering in? Right now there's 4-year waiting lists to get into long-term care facilities already, and it hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, a friend of mine mentioned that a relative is on a 5-year waiting list for a long-term care facility, and this person has not yet been declared palliative care. So the person has no way of getting to the head of the list or anything like that, and how these dissimilar kinds of people are going to exist when there isn't the bed space available for them. How many people are having a difficult time maintaining their current living accommodations, and going up and down stairs for some people is one heck of a chore. And they can only afford to do that once a day downstairs and once a day back upstairs. And people like that, I find that, in my estimation, is one heck of a hard existence when they can't enjoy the good life that has been promised to people, supposedly, after they retire.
They know statistically what people spend money on at every phase in their life. They've been studying this for 100 years, and they know that people have the most disposable income between the ages of 45 and 50. At 50, people have an awakening. And the awakening is, I'm closer to 65 than I am to 20. I need to start saving now. So now you've got all of these people that are 50 plus that have had this awakening. I got to start saving money, and there's no safe place to put it. This is the problem. The stock market has been turned into a casino, or it's all speculation driven, mostly. So right at the point when literally 40% of society is going to be forced to stop spending, where do you put your money that's safe?
Well, that gets scary if we're talking about resources not being there and the demand is still going to go on. Are people going to be downsized out of companies that are collapsing? Are people who thought they had some sort of an investment plan to look after their retirement, are they going to be shaken right out of any kind of confidence at all about what the future holds for them?
90% of the private pensions are held by only 31% of the family units. Now they talk in different terms again. So family units are actually two people instead of, let's say, one person. So 31% of family units hold 90% of the wealth. Okay, that's great. That means 60%, well, 30% have nothing, and the other 60% don't have enough, is basically what that's saying. If the government does not act seriously, creating a plan of where we're going to house these people when they can no longer take care of themselves, we are going to see an epidemic of elderly poverty that's going to make us look like the third world. Forget about we're going to go play golf all day. That's a beautiful little fantasy. When the rug gets pulled out from under this thing, where do we put them all? How do we feed them all? We cannot wait any longer. We have to build the infrastructure that is going to take care of these people.
We already see parts of the world where on one side of things we have people dying from diseases caused by obesity. Now granted, that may be the small part of the world, but the bigger part of the world is dying of starvation or diseases which are further complicated by starvation and malnutrition. And how many places around the world are there where a significant portion of the population doesn't even make it to 5 years of age?
Exactly. Which actually brings us to why we've asked you to come here today, because you spent 20 plus years with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. And what we actually want to discuss now is the entire concept of carrying capacity, which you've enlightened me about, and I think is directly applicable to everything we're discussing here. What is carrying capacity in nature?
If we think about ourselves or any life form, there are 4 essentials that we need. We need food, we need water, we need shelter from storms. The 4th necessity is escape cover, essentially from predators. These 4 essentials of life are still valid, that if economic situations deteriorate, is this going to become a matter of survival of the fittest? The comparison that I'm drawing with agriculture, we can look at a nice flat pasture field with lush grass is big enough to adequately pasture 10 head of livestock. Maybe it's 5 cows and 5 calves, but they're doing well. The grass is nice and green and it's tall and they're feeding easily, and maybe there's a little pond over in the corner of the pasture field so they can get a drink whenever they want it. If we take a look at poor pasture, and if you put 5 cows and 5 calves into that poor quality pasture, they're just plain not going to do as well. They're going to be on the verge of starvation if somebody doesn't take some of those cows and some of those calves out of there. So where you're comparing good pasture with 10 animals in it, you can have a different field of the same size, but it's just plain not capable of supporting 10 animals. And that's where your concept of carrying capacity comes into the equation. How many animals of whatever kind or species can live in a particular area?
And if we relate it to the economy, we've replaced our need for food with money. Because as long as you have money, you can go buy the food that you want. So 40% of the society is about to, because they've turned 50 and they realize they have to save, they're going to start spending perpetually less until the day that they die. If we've replaced food with money and the system needs to grow forever, how does that work?
I can't see how it's going to work. Now, maybe there's something I'm missing, but if we have an ever-increasing population and yet there are decreasing resources, if we're going to have to cut back from 5 cows and 5 calves down to 3 cows and 3 calves, what's going to happen to the other 2 cows and 2 calves? In agriculture, it's pretty simple. They end up going to market. They end up losing their lives, and that's the steak on somebody's table. But we don't make, at least not yet, we don't make steaks out of people.
And the government's very aware of this. Actually, you were telling me earlier that the surveys that they do of the deer population specifically determines exactly how many licenses are issued every year.
Quite so.
So the government is very aware of the concept of carrying capacity because they actually have it part of the entire system.
Yes. I'm not fully convinced that a department or a ministry over here talks very much, if at all, to a department or a ministry over there. Now, just because biologists can measure deer herds and regulate the number of licenses issued each fall doesn't necessarily mean that the people in a different ministry or department are looking with a critical eye at what's happening to the human population. And if they're not, then what kind of misadventures are we possibly or likely to get into?
People have been totally misinformed or led to believe that the government is here to lead. It's not true. The government's job is to administer the running of the society, yet we look at them like they are leaders. How many people are former government elected officials? How many of them are getting $80,000 plus a year for the rest of their life because they got elected twice? How much of that is being, that's not even in the article here. So these numbers don't even make sense as far as long-term sustainability or even realistic deliverability. You can't have all of these people thinking that they're going to have the moon pulled out of the sky and put in their pocket.
I guess my particular bias as a former provincial employee, I question the role of leadership. I mean, you mentioned the fact that people think of government as being leaders in whatever kind of enterprise. I question that. And the thing that concerns me is if the government is not planning and leading in a positive direction, exactly what is happening? Where is the leadership coming from that is going to prevent people from being treated as, dirty old boot?
Deer waiting to be called.
Yeah, and who is going to choose which people are removed from the population or the manner by which they're going to be removed, and which people are going to be allowed to enjoy their so-called golden years, as we keep talking about? And how is this disparity between the people who are going to enjoy life going to contrast to the people who are left in penury and we all understand the variety of diseases that are further exacerbated by poor nutrition, a poor diet, and how are things just going to end up being too complicated for these people who have less than they need to live an enjoyable retirement? If government is not providing the leadership to keep things a little bit better together so that everybody shares, not necessarily fully equal, but if people are not sharing to some extent in the golden years, what happens to them? The government knows what the numbers are in comparison to what they should be, and that's where I'm having a problem with that concept of leadership. If governments are not bringing numbers from where they are to where they should be, how do you call that leadership?
Well, and what are the options? This is the horrific thing that no one wants to deal with. No one wants to deal with, we're talking human lives here. No one wants to be the one to say, you know what, we don't need to keep these people heavily medicated so that they can basically be pillaged of all of their savings by the pharmaceutical companies in a no standard of living but alive, technically. Like, this is where it's going to have to be dealt with, and it's going to have to be dealt with sooner than later. The scale of it is mind-numbing. It is going to be like a Night of the Living Dead horror movie. They are everywhere. It's just the same thing. And these are human beings. There are people that worked hard, that did what they were told. Statistically, this has never happened before. Well, first of all, we've never dealt with anything as a species the size of the baby boomer bubble. We have never dealt with anything on this scale. There's nothing that can psychologically prepare us for what we are about to witness. There's nothing. Like we were saying, are we supposed to cut down every tree from here to Sault Ste. Marie for the 10 million caskets we're going to need? This little article is the closest I've seen from anything from the government even acknowledging that we have a problem, and it is going to escalate so fast people don't even have a clue what is coming. There's going to be a 2-year peak where there are going to be thousands of people a day dying. Thousands a day on a national scale. Seems like a long way away, but once again, you're 50, you're 65, it's going to happen. Like, we have to really figure out an actual plan that we cannot wait till 1 year before to do.
Okay, if, and I'm saying if in quotes, if the government is not doing the plan for these potential future events, who is or who should be?
Or are they just leaving it to private enterprise again? They'll figure it out. That seems to be the motto.
Well, that concerns me because my limited understanding of things, the business of business is making money, making a profit.
Well, and I don't know where the profits come from, because according to these numbers, 60% of them aren't going to have any money anyway. They have no private plan. They're literally going to be relying on whatever the government gives them, a huge percentage. So what's the incentive for private industry to build it anyway? That's what people don't get yet, is everyone thinks, oh yeah, you know what, don't worry, sooner or later Joe developer is just going to start building these facilities. Well, the people can't pay to be in them.
If the numbers you're putting forward are anywhere near correct, where is going to be the room to put all these facilities? Old age homes, or whatever we want to call them. Retirement facilities, long-term care facilities. Where are they going to go if there are that number of people that have to be housed